An Arab billionaire buys a single mother at an auction to have a child. But what he discovers later leaves him shocked. Before we begin the story, let us know in the comments. From which city are you watching? Enjoy the story, everyone. Layla was a young woman facing countless hardships with her son, Ayman. With no other options, she decided to participate in an unusual auction where women were auctioned off like objects and their company purchased by wealthy, powerful men. For her, it wasn't a choice. It was her only chance. Sitting in a corner of the luxurious hall, Layla felt the crushing weight of the decisions that had brought her there. Her heart pounded erratically, each beat filled with fear and uncertainty about what lay ahead. But she kept thinking of her son, Ayman, who was in the care of her elderly neighbor that night. The overdue bills, the looming threat of eviction, and the nights Ayman went to bed hungry had driven her to make this unthinkable decision. The event organizer, a man in an impeccable suit and a forced smile, approached her to give instructions. "Remember, Layla, maintain your composure. Smile and don't look directly at the guests," he instructed before walking away. The hall was filled with men in elegant attire, watching each woman as if they were priceless works of art on display. Layla felt a lump in her throat as her name was called. "Lot number 23, the organizer announced in his theatrical, calculated voice. Layla's legs trembled as she climbed the steps to the brightly lit stage. The intense lights momentarily blinded her, and the heat from the spotlights brought beads of sweat to her forehead. She tried to keep her head held high, but felt the predatory gazes fixed on her. "A true exotic beauty," the organizer continued, using adjectives that made Layla feel even more exposed. The crowd murmured in approval. Suddenly, a deep, commanding voice cut through the room. $1 million. The hall fell into complete silence. All eyes turned toward a man with tanned skin and piercing eyes, seated in the last row. He exuded an aura of power and authority. Karim Al-Fayed, an Arab magnate known for his wealth and discretion, had made his bid. The organizer, surprised by the opening sum, repeated the amount to confirm. No other bids followed. "Sold," he announced, wearing a satisfied smile. Layla felt her legs weaken, but she kept her composure as she stepped off the stage. Her life had just changed irreversibly. Karim approached her, his gaze serious and unreadable. "We need to discuss the terms," he said calmly, extending his hand to guide her. Layla hesitated but followed him to a private room, where the fate she had sealed on the stage would officially be determined. The room was spacious and elegantly furnished. Karim gestured toward an armchair for Layla to sit. He walked over to a nearby table and picked up an envelope that had been placed there beforehand. "Here's the contract," he said, handing it to Layla. "Read it carefully." Layla took the document, her hands trembling. The silence in the room was deafening as she read the first few clauses. Her breathing grew heavier as she reached the main section. "You want me to have a child and leave it with you?" she asked, her voice shaking. Karim crossed his arms and nodded. "I need an heir. After the child is born, you'll leave. The contract makes that very clear." Layla stood up, a wave of indignation and fear washing over her. "I can't do this. I won't abandon my own child." Karim's eyes narrowed, but his voice remained steady. "You knew what you were getting into when you entered that auction. There's no room for regret now." "This is inhumane," Layla shot back, gripping the contract tightly. "Do you think you can just buy a child and discard the mother?" Karim stepped forward, his presence dominating the room. "I paid $1 million for you, Layla. This wasn't a whim. Now, you have no choice." Layla felt her heart race. She knew she was trapped in a situation she couldn't easily escape. Karim placed a pen on the table in front of her. "Sign the contract. Once the baby is born, you'll receive the money and be free to go on with your life." Layla stared at the contract, her hands shaking with anger and despair. She thought of Ayman and the sacrifice she was making to secure his future. Tears threatened to fall, but she held them back. "This isn't right," she murmured, sitting down again. Karim leaned in, his gaze intense. "What's right or wrong doesn't matter here. What matters is that you honor the agreement." Layla knew she had no choice. With a heavy heart, she picked up the pen and signed the contract. Karim took the document and said, "Very well. Tomorrow morning, we'll do the necessary medical exams and you'll be taken to my mansion. Get some rest." He left the room, leaving Layla alone with her thoughts and regrets. She looked at her signature on the contract, feeling as though she had sealed her own fate. The next day, a limousine waited for Layla in front of the small apartment where she lived. Saying goodbye to Ayman had been brief and painful. She had told him she needed to work far away for a few months, promising to call whenever she could. The child, innocent and unaware, waved with a confident smile, oblivious to what his mother was enduring. The journey to the mansion was silent. Layla stared out the window, watching the desert landscape gradually give way to modern, luxurious structures. When they arrived, the grandeur of the property left her speechless. Tall iron gates opened to reveal immaculate gardens and a mansion that seemed straight out of a fairy tale. Karim was waiting at the entrance, his expression as serious as ever. He guided her inside, briefly explaining the rooms and the house rules. "Your privacy will be respected, but I expect you to fulfill your part of the agreement without question," he said before leaving her in the care of a staff member named Amira. Amira, a kind middle-aged woman, showed Layla to her room. The space was furnished with elegant decor and soft tones, a stark contrast to the simplicity of her previous life. On the bed lay clothes and accessories selected for her. "If you need anything, I'll be nearby," Amira said with a warm smile. Layla thanked her, but couldn't shake the feeling of being a stranger in this place. That night, as she gazed at the horizon from her room's balcony, her thoughts turned to Ayman. The pain of being away from him was suffocating, but she had to believe she was doing what was best to secure his future. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Karim. "Tomorrow we'll visit my trusted doctor," he informed her before leaving. Layla nodded silently. The weight of her decision grew heavier with each passing moment, but there was no turning back now. The next morning, Layla woke early, the silence of the mansion more unsettling than comforting. Her first night there had been sleepless, filled with incessant thoughts about what lay ahead. The bed was soft, the sheets silk, but the weight of reality made peace impossible to find. Soon, Amira knocked on the door to escort her to Karim's doctor. The journey through the mansion was marked by its evident luxury. Hallways adorned with Persian rugs, paintings by renowned artists, and vast windows showcasing the meticulously maintained gardens. Layla barely had time to take it all in before stepping into the limousine that would take them to the clinic. The doctor's office was in a modern building in the heart of Dubai. Dr. Ibrahim, a man with a calm demeanor and a reassuring voice, greeted Layla professionally. After thorough examinations, he declared that everything was in perfect condition to begin the fertilization process. Layla nodded silently, trying to mask her unease. Karim remained distant throughout the procedure, observing from afar with his usual composed posture. For him, this was merely another step toward fulfilling his responsibilities. But for Layla, it was a painful reminder that at the end of those 9 months, she would face the heartbreak of leaving behind a piece of herself. Back at the mansion, Layla tried to distract herself by exploring the place. Every room seemed more extravagant than the last, as if Karim's wealth knew no bounds. There was a library with floor-to-ceiling shelves, an indoor pool surrounded by marble columns, and a music room filled with exotic instruments. Despite its splendor, the mansion felt empty, almost soulless. Layla noticed that although Karim lived surrounded by beauty, his life seemed marked by deep loneliness. He rarely smiled, and his few acts of courtesy were cold and calculated. In the first few days, Karim limited his interactions with Layla to practical matters. He ensured everything was in line with the contract, but never attempted to build a personal connection. Layla, on the other hand, felt increasingly out of place. She spent her nights staring at the ceiling, wondering how her son was doing, and her mornings trying to come to terms with the fact that soon she would carry a child she couldn't call her own. In the second week, Karim hosted a formal dinner at the mansion for some business associates. Layla was instructed to dress elegantly and accompany Karim as part of the agreement. The dress she wore was stunning, but her steps were uncertain as she descended the grand staircase. In the hall, the guests observed her with curiosity. Some greeted her politely, while others exchanged glances that made her feel exposed. Karim, however, stayed by her side the entire time, introducing her as "my special guest." "Are you okay?" he asked in a rare moment of concern as they stepped aside to a quieter corner. "I'm trying to adjust," Layla replied honestly. Karim nodded but said nothing more. For him, social events were a formality, an extension of his obligations. For Layla, however, it was a plunge into a world she didn't fully understand. After the dinner, Layla went up to her room, exhausted. Before sleeping, she called her neighbor to check on Eamon. Her son's cheerful voice comforted her, but also brought tears. She felt an overwhelming longing, but she knew she couldn't give in to the temptation to turn back. As the days passed, Layla began to notice small details about Karim that contradicted his rigid exterior. He was meticulous and demanding, but also showed brief moments of humanity. One afternoon, she found him in the garden, personally watering a rare plant that seemed special to him. "This plant belonged to my mother," he explained, noticing Layla's curiosity. She used to say that caring for it brought peace. Layla felt a pang of empathy. For the first time, Karim seemed less like an imposing figure and more like a man trying to cope with his own pain. She began to realize that, although their motivations differed, both of them carried heavy burdens. Amira also began to open up more to Layla. During the long afternoons at the mansion, the housekeeper shared stories about Karim's life, recounting how he had taken on responsibilities at a very young age after the death of his parents. These conversations helped Layla better understand the man who, until then, seemed impenetrable. Even so, the loneliness lingered. Layla avoided growing attached to the mansion or Karim, constantly reminding herself that her time there was limited. Yet, amidst the isolation, she found solace in her walks through the gardens and the quiet nights spent stargazing from her balcony. One evening, Karim knocked on her door. He seemed less rigid than usual. His expression slightly softened. "We need to talk," he said, entering. Layla sat down, expecting more instructions or demands. Instead, Karim appeared uncertain, as if searching for the right words. "I know this arrangement is difficult for you," he began. "I don't intend to make it harder. I just want you to know that, despite everything, I respect your courage." Layla was taken aback. Karim's words were unexpectedly kind, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes she hadn't noticed before: vulnerability. The moment was brief, but it was enough to plant a seed of doubt in her mind. Perhaps Karim wasn't as cold as he appeared. Perhaps, behind the facade, there was someone as broken as she was. After he left, Layla found herself reflecting on their conversation. For the first time since arriving at the mansion, she felt there might be a possibility, however distant, of discovering something deeper in their relationship. The days at the mansion continued at a slow pace, but each moment seemed to add a new layer to the complex dynamic between Layla and Karim. They were like puzzle pieces, trying to fit together amidst the circumstances that had brought them together. Layla knew that time was passing and that soon she would carry Karim's child. This reality terrified her, but it also stirred a growing curiosity. Who was the man who had asked her to make such a profound sacrifice? Life at the mansion began to follow a more predictable rhythm. Layla, though still struggling with the weight of her decision, started to notice small details about the house and her new routine. The garden became her refuge, a place where she could feel the warmth of the sun and listen to the soothing sound of water flowing through the fountains. She noticed that Karim also spent a lot of time in the gardens. He didn't go out of his way to start conversations, but Layla could tell he was observing her every move. There was a subtle tension in the air, something both of them recognized but chose not to address. One afternoon, while walking through the garden, Layla noticed Karim meticulously pruning a tree. When he sensed her presence, he glanced up briefly before returning to his task, making it clear he wasn't expecting a conversation. "Do you enjoy gardening?" Layla ventured, breaking the silence. "It helps me organize my thoughts," Karim replied without looking at her. Layla sensed a small opening in his response. He was reserved, but not entirely unapproachable. She decided to respect his space, but couldn't ignore her growing curiosity about the complexity behind his rigid facade. That evening, during dinner, Karim surprised Layla by joining her at the table. Until then, her meals had been solitary, served by Amira in her room or a quiet corner of the house. He seemed calm, but his presence carried a weight Layla couldn't overlook. "Are you adjusting?" he asked, breaking the silence as he poured himself a glass of wine. I think so, as much as I can, Layla replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Karim studied her for a moment, as if trying to read her thoughts. I know it's not easy, but I hope you understand that all of this is necessary. Layla wanted to ask, necessary for whom? But kept the thought to herself. Instead, she nodded and continued eating in silence. There was something in the way he spoke that suggested, beneath his imposing demeanor, he carried an emotional burden he carefully concealed. As weeks passed, Layla began noticing small acts of kindness from Karim. He was discreet, yet thoughtful. One day, after she casually mentioned missing certain foods from her homeland, Amira brought a tray of dishes prepared especially for her. Mr. Karim asked me to make these, Amira explained with a smile. Layla was surprised, but said nothing. It was hard to decipher Karim's intentions. On one hand, he was cold and distant. On the other, he seemed to care about her well-being in subtle ways. One morning, Layla found a collection of books neatly arranged on her bedside table. Among them were novels and stories she had mentioned during a casual conversation. She couldn't help but feel a warmth in her chest, realizing Karim paid attention to the little things. A defining moment occurred when Layla approached the mansion's music room. The door was slightly ajar, and soft piano notes echoed down the hallway. Curious, she stepped inside and saw Karim playing with a skill she never would have expected. You play piano? She asked, surprised. Karim looked up, clearly startled to have been caught in such an intimate moment. My mother taught me when I was a child, he said, pulling his hands away from the keyboard. It's beautiful, Layla remarked, stepping closer. He averted his gaze as if unsure how to respond to a compliment. In that brief moment, Layla saw that beneath all his rigidity was someone with a deep emotional connection to his past. On another occasion, Layla was in the garden when a small bird fell from a branch, clearly injured. Without hesitation, she knelt and gently picked up the fragile creature. Karim appeared shortly after, watching her with curiosity. What will you do with it? He asked. I'll take care of it until it's strong enough to fly again, Layla replied with conviction. Karim remained silent, but there was something in his eyes that suggested admiration. That simple act of compassion seemed to touch him in an unexpected way. The nights in the mansion were lonely, but Layla found comfort in the small routines she developed. She enjoyed wandering the silent corridors, marveling at the grandeur of the architecture. One evening, she crossed paths with Karim in the hallway. He looked tired, his features softer than usual. Can't sleep? He asked. Layla hesitated before replying. Sometimes it's hard, with so much on my mind. Karim nodded, as though he understood completely. To her surprise, he invited her to have tea in the library. Seated among shelves filled with books, they talked for longer than they ever had before. In that moment, Layla realized she was beginning to see beyond Karim's mask. The household staff noticed the changes too. Amira, who had always been kind, now seemed closer to Layla, treating her like a friend. Even Karim appeared more at ease in her presence. Though he still maintained his formality, there was something different in the way he looked at her, as if he was beginning to see her in a new light. Layla, in turn, began to feel less isolated. Despite the nature of their contract, she found herself discovering small moments of connection and meaning in the seemingly empty mansion. Yet the reality of her situation still loomed over her like a shadow. Each day she reminded herself that all of this was temporary. As the first signs of change in their dynamic emerged, Layla knew she needed to prepare for the challenges ahead. Karim was a complex man, and she was only just beginning to understand the layers of his personality. Deep down, she knew their journeys were only starting to intertwine on a deeper level. The days continued to pass, and Layla found herself increasingly immersed in the mansion's routine. Despite her efforts to maintain emotional distance, small moments with Karim began to leave an impression on her. He, in turn, displayed a growing, albeit restrained, interest in getting to know her better. I see in them the future, something that needs to be nurtured with love and responsibility, he replied. That experience deeply moved Layla, who began to realize that Karim had layers she had yet to uncover. Let's play a little game with those who only read the comments. Type McDonald's in the comments. Only those who've made it this far will understand. Now, Let's continue the story. Over time, small gestures brought them closer. Kareem began asking more about Layla's likes and interests, and she, in turn, found ways to show appreciation for his attentiveness. Their conversations in the garden became a routine, as did their evenings in the library, where they shared books and discussed their stories. During one of those nights, Kareem asked a question that caught her off guard. If you could change anything about your past, what would it be? Layla remained silent for a few moments, thinking, I think I'd have chosen more wisely whom to trust. But at the same time, I'm not sure I'd change everything. Without the wrong choices, I wouldn't have Ayman. Her son's name hung in the air like a shadow. Kareem sensed the weight of her words and shifted the conversation, giving her space. Despite their growing connection, Layla still felt uncertain. She knew the contract between them was a barrier that couldn't be ignored. No matter how much she began to like Kareem, the thought of their time being limited to 9 months lingered in her mind. One night, as Layla gazed at the stars from her balcony, Kareem joined her. They sat in silence for a while, simply contemplating the sky. You think a lot about the future, don't you? He asked, breaking the silence. I can't help it, Layla admitted. All of this feels so temporary. Kareem turned to her, and for a brief moment, his eyes met hers with an intensity that made her hold her breath. The future can be built, Layla. It all depends on how we choose to handle the present. Layla felt a warmth she couldn't explain from those words. Although he hadn't spoken directly, there was an implicit promise in his tone, something that made her believe their destiny might still be unwritten. The staff at the mansion began to notice the change in atmosphere. The coldness that once filled the place had been replaced by a lighter, almost welcoming vibe. Amira, in particular, was pleased to see how Kareem seemed less isolated and more open. Layla also noticed changes within herself. For the first time in months, she felt she was reconnecting with a part of herself she thought she'd lost. Even so, Layla knew she was approaching a crossroads. She was fully aware that the feelings developing between her and Kareem could complicate things even further. But for now, she chose to embrace the present, even though the future remained uncertain. Dawn brought a soft light to the mansion, but Layla felt restless. The bond forming between her and Kareem was something she hadn't anticipated, and the weight of the secret about Ayman grew heavier each day. The possibility of Kareem discovering the truth terrified her. Yet keeping it hidden was becoming increasingly unbearable. After breakfast, Layla decided to walk through the gardens to clear her mind. She tried to lose herself among the flowers and trees, but her peace was interrupted when she heard Amira calling her urgently. Layla hurried back to the mansion and found Kareem in the living room, holding a photograph. His expression was difficult to read. "Who is this boy?" he asked, his voice controlled but laden with tension. Layla froze. The photo in his hands was of Ayman, one of the few she had brought with her. She had hidden it carefully, but somehow, Kareem had found it. "He's my son," Layla admitted, her voice trembling. The silence that followed was suffocating. Kareem walked slowly toward her, his dark eyes locked on hers. "You lied to me," he said, his voice low but sharp. "Why didn't you tell me from the start?" Layla felt tears welling up but forced herself to keep her head high. "I was afraid. Afraid it would complicate everything. That you'd think I wasn't suitable for the contract." Kareem crossed his arms, still scrutinizing her. "And why did you agree to this, knowing you'd have to leave another child behind?" The question hit Layla like a blow. She took a deep breath before answering. "I did it for him. For the bills, the overdue rent, the nights he went to bed hungry. I had no other choice." Her words were filled with emotion, and Kareem remained silent for a long moment, as though processing everything he had just heard. Finally, he turned and walked to the window. "You should have trusted me," he said, gazing at the horizon. Layla felt the weight of disappointment in his words and couldn't hold back her tears. She knew this moment could shatter the connection they were building, but she also knew she could no longer hide the truth. Later that night, Kareem asked Layla to join him in the library. The room was dimly lit by the soft glow of a lamp, creating an intimate yet tense atmosphere. Kareem sat in his usual chair, a folder of documents in front of him. "I've reviewed the terms of our contract," he began bluntly. There's nothing in it that mentions the possibility of you keeping secrets like this. However, it also doesn't address how to handle the situation we're in now." Layla felt a wave of panic. "Please, don't send me away. I'll fulfill my part of the agreement, I promise." Karim raised a hand to stop her. "I'm not suggesting that. But trust is essential, Layla. And now we need to rebuild it." He opened the folder and pulled out a sheet, sliding it toward her so she could read. "I want you to see Ayman. You're allowed to visit him, but on one condition: he cannot know the truth about our arrangement." "Not yet." Layla blinked, stunned. Karim's generosity caught her off guard, but it also brought a fresh wave of guilt. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Karim sighed, folding his hands on the table. "Because I know what it's like to grow up without answers. I want your son to have at least part of your presence, even if it's only temporary." Those words carried a pain Layla hadn't expected. For the first time, she felt she was beginning to understand the reasons behind Karim's rigid demeanor. He wasn't just a man seeking an heir. He was also someone carrying deep scars. The next day, Layla was taken to visit Ayman. The journey was long, but each mile brought her closer to her son. When she arrived, emotions overwhelmed her. Ayman ran into her arms the moment he saw her, and Layla held him tightly, as if she never wanted to let him go. "Mommy, you're back!" he exclaimed, his voice filled with joy. Layla smiled, but her heart felt heavy. She knew this visit was only temporary and that soon she would have to leave him again. They spent the day together, playing and laughing as they had in the old days. But as night fell, Layla felt the weight of their impending goodbye. When the moment came, Ayman hugged her tightly, asking when she would return. "Soon, my love," she promised, even though she knew how uncertain that word was. Back at the mansion, Layla was both physically and emotionally drained. Karim was waiting for her in the living room, his expression calm. "How is he?" he asked, his voice laced with genuine concern. Layla sank into the sofa across from him, feeling completely vulnerable. "He's well. Happy. But it's hard to leave him." Karim nodded as if he understood perfectly. He said nothing more, but his gaze conveyed something words couldn't express. In the days that followed, the dynamic between them shifted. There was a quiet understanding, a mutual respect that hadn't existed before. Karim became more considerate, and Layla, in turn, began to trust him more. Small gestures like sharing a meal or chatting during a walk in the gardens became meaningful moments. One evening, as they sat in the library, Karim revealed something Layla hadn't expected. "My mother died when I was young," he said, his voice low. "My father was always distant, focused on business. I grew up with responsibilities before I even understood what they meant." Layla watched him closely, realizing he was sharing something deeply personal. "That must have been difficult," she said sincerely. "It was. But I think it shaped who I am today. And no matter how hard I try, I can't shake the feeling that something will always be missing." Layla felt an urge to comfort him, but knew Karim still kept some barriers up. Even so, that moment of vulnerability brought them closer together. As the months passed, their relationship continued to evolve. What had initially been a cold agreement was now marked by mutual respect and admiration. Layla began to see Karim not just as a powerful man, but as someone capable of great humanity. Karim, in turn, saw in Layla a strength and compassion he hadn't expected. Still, they both knew that time was passing and that they would soon have to face the uncertain future awaiting them. The days after Layla's visit to Ayman brought a strange calm to the mansion. There was something different in the way Karim and Layla interacted. What had once been a tense relationship now felt marked by a quiet acceptance. Yet the weight of the contract still loomed over them like a constant shadow. Layla found solace in small routines. Her morning walks in the garden, afternoons reading in the library, and nights spent stargazing from the balcony. Despite this, the thought of her son never left her, and the sound of his voice continued to echo in her mind. One morning, while having her coffee, Layla was surprised by Karim's arrival. He seemed more relaxed than usual, and there was something almost friendly in his expression. "I want you to come with me today," he said, breaking the silence. Layla looked at him, intrigued. "Where to?" she asked. "I have a meeting at one of my family's properties. It's a quiet place and I think you'll like it." She hesitated for a moment, but eventually agreed. Any opportunity to leave the mansion was welcome. The car ride was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Karim drove calmly, while Layla watched the scenery change as they left the city center. After nearly an hour, they arrived at a secluded property surrounded by sand dunes. The place was peaceful, with a small house built in traditional Arabic style. "This place was my mother's retreat," Karim explained as they stepped out of the car. "She used to come here whenever she needed peace." Layla followed Karim to the house, admiring its simplicity and charm. Unlike the mansion, everything here felt more inviting. The walls were adorned with rugs and antique lanterns, and the air was filled with the scent of aromatic herbs. Karim led her to a terrace overlooking the desert. The silence was absolute, broken only by the soft sound of the wind. Layla sat in one of the wooden chairs, feeling more at ease than she had in weeks. "This is the only place where I can think clearly," Karim confessed as he sat beside her. "It's beautiful," Layla replied, gazing at the horizon. Karim remained silent for a few moments before asking, "Do you miss your home?" Layla sighed, reflecting on her life before all of this. "I miss what it represented. A simple place, but full of memories." Karim nodded, seeming to understand. There was something comforting about that moment, a connection that didn't need words. After the visit to the property, the relationship between Karim and Layla became even more natural. He started involving her in more aspects of his life, like meetings with the mansion staff and decisions about the daily routine. For Layla, it was an opportunity to better understand the man behind the facade of a ruthless businessman. One evening, during dinner, Karim brought up an unexpected topic. "I've been thinking about making some renovations to the mansion," he said casually. "Something to make it feel more welcoming." Layla raised her eyebrows, surprised. "And what do you have in mind?" "I want to create a space where a family could feel at home," Karim replied, averting his gaze. Layla felt her heart tighten. It was the first time he had mentioned the possibility of a future that included more than just their contract. However, she knew there was still much to resolve before such a vision could become reality. One afternoon, as Layla walked through the gardens, she found Amira carrying a tray with tea and cookies. The housekeeper seemed radiant, and Layla couldn't help but comment, "You seem especially cheerful today, Amira. Did something happen?" Amira smiled, her eyes sparkling. "It's just nice to see how things are changing around here. The mansion has never felt so full of life." Layla felt her face flush, but didn't respond. She knew Amira was referring to the shifting dynamic between her and Karim. As uncertain as she still felt about the future, it was undeniable that something was blossoming. As the days passed, Layla began to notice that Karim was changing too. He spent more time with her, showing himself to be more vulnerable and approachable. Conversations that were once brief and formal now stretched for hours, with both of them sharing more about their lives. In one of those conversations, Karim revealed something that deeply touched Layla. "I never knew how to cope with losing my mother," he confessed, his voice heavy with emotion. "She was the anchor of our family. When she was gone, everything fell apart." Layla felt a wave of empathy. She knew what it was like to lose someone important, even if in different ways. That moment created an even stronger bond between them. Despite their growing closeness, Layla knew the contract was still a barrier. As much as she was growing attached to Karim, the reality of their situation couldn't be ignored. She spent sleepless nights wondering about the future, trying to balance her feelings with her responsibilities. One night, Karim knocked on her door, asking to talk. He seemed unsettled, as if grappling with something important. "I know we have our limitations," he began, sitting in the chair across from Layla's bed. "But I want you to know that I'm trying to understand what all of this means." Layla felt her heart race. There was something in his words that hinted at a significant shift. "I'm trying to," she replied honestly. Karim nodded, seeming relieved to hear that. Despite the lingering uncertainties, both were willing to face whatever came next together. The mansion staff began to notice the impact of these changes. Amira, ever observant, remarked how Karim seemed lighter, more human. Even the other employees commented on how Layla's presence had transformed the once cold and impersonal atmosphere. Layla, for her part, felt more at home. Despite the weight of the contract, she started seeing the mansion as more than just a temporary stop. It was a place where she was building something, even if she wasn't yet sure what it would become. At the end of each day, as she gazed at the stars, Layla knew she was approaching a turning point. The bond forming between her and Karim was something she hadn't planned for, but now felt inevitable. Both were changing, and the journey they had started together was beginning to take a shape neither could have predicted. The days at the mansion continued to pass, but something undeniable lingered in the air. Layla and Karim's connection was deepening. Small gestures, lingering glances, and extended conversations hinted that the boundaries of the contract were being challenged. Yet Layla knew that every moment they shared was leading her closer to a critical juncture. One morning, as Karim reviewed documents in his office, Layla walked in with a tray of coffee. He looked up, clearly surprised, but said nothing as she set the tray on the desk. "I thought you could use a break," she said, trying to sound casual. Karim studied her for a moment before replying. "Thank you. Lately it's been hard to stay focused." Layla hesitated before sitting in the chair opposite him. "Something with the business?" He shook his head. "No, just a lot to process." The silence that followed was heavy but not uncomfortable. Both seemed to weigh the unspoken words hanging between them. Layla finally broke the silence. "Do you feel you've made the right decision so far?" Karim looked at her, his expression softening. "I'm not sure. Life taught me to be pragmatic, but sometimes I wonder if being so rigid has distanced me from what truly matters." Layla sensed the vulnerability in his words. For the first time, he seemed to be admitting that more was at stake than just his family and business obligations. In the days that followed, their routine began to shift. Karim started inviting Layla to accompany him to the meetings and social events. He seemed genuinely interested in including her in his world, and Layla began to understand better the pressures and responsibilities he carried. During a charity dinner, Karim introduced Layla as his companion. The guests exchanged curious glances, but Karim appeared indifferent. To him, the opinions of others were irrelevant. Layla, however, felt uneasy under the weight of the attention she was receiving. "Are you okay?" Karim asked, leading her to a quieter corner. "I'm getting used to it," Layla replied, forcing a smile. Karim briefly held her hand, a gesture that surprised her but also comforted her. "Don't worry, I'm here with you." Those simple yet meaningful words filled Layla with an inexplicable warmth. Their moments of intimacy became more frequent. Layla noticed that Karim was opening up more, sharing details about his life that had previously been hidden. He spoke about his childhood, his family's expectations, and the pressure of maintaining the Al Fayed legacy. In return, Layla shared stories of her own life, about the struggles of raising Ayman and the small moments of joy she found amidst the challenges. Karim listened attentively, revealing a more human and receptive side. One night, as they walked through the moonlit gardens, Karim stopped abruptly. "Layla, I want you to know that, despite everything, you've shown me things I'd never noticed before." Layla looked at him, surprised. "Like what?" "That there's more to life than obligations and contracts. That sometimes you need to make room for something new." Layla felt her heart race. She knew she was falling for Karim, but she also knew the contract remained an unyielding barrier. The mansion staff began to notice the change in their dynamic. Amira, ever observant, started treating Layla with more warmth, almost as if she already saw her as a permanent part of the household. Other staff members exchanged knowing smiles whenever they saw Karim and Layla together. Despite this, Layla couldn't ignore the weight of reality. With each passing day, the end of the contract loomed closer. The fear of losing everything, including the bond she had built with Karim, gnawed at her. One afternoon, as Layla was reading in the library, Karim entered with a somber expression. "We need to talk," he said, closing the door behind him. Layla set the book aside, sensing the tension in the air. "What's going on?" Karim sat across from her, clasping his hands on the table. "We need to discuss the future. I know the contract outlines what should happen after the baby is born, but things have changed." Layla held her breath. She had known this moment would come, but she wasn't prepared. "What do you mean by that?" she asked hesitantly. "I want to consider other options," Karim said firmly. "I don't want you to just leave." Layla's heart raced, but she didn't know how to respond. What he was suggesting was exactly what she hoped for, yet the fear of raising her expectations held her back. "And what does that mean?" she finally asked. "It means we need to find a way to make this work, together." Those words echoed in Layla's mind. She knew the situation was complicated, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope. In the days that followed, Layla and Kareem began speaking more openly about their fears and expectations. Both knew they were dealing with feelings far beyond what they had planned. Layla began envisioning a future with Kareem and her son, while Kareem started seeing the possibility of building a real family. Even so, they still faced challenges. Kareem remained haunted by his family's expectations, while Layla struggled to accept that her life would never be the same. But together, they found strength in each other. On a quiet evening, as they watched the stars from the terrace, Kareem turned to Layla and said something she would never forget. "I didn't know what love was until you came into my life." Tears streamed down Layla's face, but this time they weren't from sadness. She knew that despite the difficulties, something special had blossomed between them. The mansion, once cold and isolated, now held the potential to be a home, and the bond between them was stronger than any contract. As the sun began to set over the mansion, casting a golden glow through the windows, Layla sat in the music room at the piano, one of her newfound sanctuaries. She gently ran her fingers over the keys, creating a melancholic melody when Kareem entered quietly. "Did you teach yourself to play?" he asked, interrupting the gentle flow of music. Layla looked up, surprised, but offered a faint smile. "My mother taught me when I was little. It was something that connected us, even in difficult times." Kareem nodded, stepping closer. He sat beside her on the piano bench, watching her fingers glide delicately over the keys. "You have talent," he said softly. Layla felt the weight of the tension between them, but didn't respond. Kareem remained silent for a few moments before continuing. "Layla, I've been thinking a lot about what we've shared, about what brought us to this point." She stopped playing and turned to face him. The seriousness in his eyes made her realize he was about to address something important. "And what have you concluded?" she asked, trying to remain calm. Kareem took a deep breath before speaking. "I can't keep ignoring the feelings that have grown between us. But I also know that my past and my family's expectations have always been obstacles." Layla felt a mix of hope and apprehension. Kareem rarely spoke about his internal struggles, and hearing this was a sign that he was ready to confront his own demons. That same evening, Kareem invited her for a walk in the gardens. The gentle breeze and rustling leaves created a serene atmosphere, but the weight of the impending conversation hung in the air. "My father was a strict man," Kareem began as they walked side by side. "He believed the family's honor was above all else. I grew up trying to meet his expectations, and it shaped the way I see the world." Layla listened attentively, feeling the pain in Kareem's words. "When my mother died, he became even more distant," Kareem continued. "Everything became about maintaining control, ensuring nothing strayed from the plan." "And that's why you feel you need an heir?" Layla asked softly. Kareem stopped and turned to her. "Partly, but also because deep down, I think I've always been afraid of being alone." Layla felt a pang in her chest. She knew what it was like to battle loneliness, but hearing this from Kareem made her realize that behind his impenetrable exterior was someone deeply human. The next day, Kareem asked Layla to join him on a trip to the desert. They left early, and soon the vast golden sands stretched out before them like an endless ocean. When they arrived at a secluded oasis, Kareem explained that this was a special place for him, a retreat he visited when he needed clarity. "This place reminds me that even in the middle of the desert, there's life," he said as they walked along the edge of the crystal-clear water. Layla felt connected to the moment, sensing it was a turning point in their journey. They sat under the shade of a palm tree, and Kareem began speaking again. "I've spent so much time trapped by the past and the expectations of others that I've never allowed myself the chance to figure out what I truly want." Layla looked at him, feeling the sincerity in his words. "And what do you want now?" she asked, her heart pounding. Kareem turned to her, his eyes shining under the sunlight. "I want to live differently. I want to build something real, something not defined by contracts or obligations." Layla felt the tears threatening to fall, but managed to hold them back. Those words were everything she had hoped to hear. Yet uncertainties still lingered between them. When they returned to the mansion, the atmosphere between them felt lighter, but both knew there were still unresolved issues. Layla spent her nights reflecting on her choices and the impact all of this would have on her son. She knew that to move forward, she would need to confront her own pain and set her fears aside. One night, while gazing at the starry sky from the balcony, Kareem joined her, carrying 2 cups of tea. He handed one to Layla and stood beside her in silence for a few moments. "You know, Layla," he began in a low voice, "I never thought I'd meet someone who would make me question everything I believed." She looked at him, feeling the weight of his words. "You've shown me that it's possible to have more, that there's room for something beyond responsibilities and expectations." Layla gave a faint smile, her eyes filled with emotion. "You've also shown me that it's possible to find strength in the midst of pain," she replied. "I wouldn't have come this far without you." In the days that followed, Kareem began taking concrete steps to change the dynamic between them. He reviewed the contract, and while the clauses regarding the child's future remained, he made it clear that he wanted to find a solution that would be fair to both of them. Layla felt a mix of relief and apprehension. She knew there were still challenges ahead, but she also sensed they were finally moving in the right direction. Let's play a little game for those who only read the comments. Type Coca-Cola in the comments. Only those who've made it this far will understand. Now, let's get back to the story. The mansion staff noticed the changes. Kareem's usual coldness had given way to a warmer demeanor, and Layla seemed more confident and at ease. One afternoon, Amira, ever observant, remarked to Layla, "I always knew Mr. Kareem had a good heart. He just needed someone to help him find it." Layla smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude for everything that had happened so far. Despite the positive changes, Layla knew the future was still uncertain. She and Kareem would have to continue facing their fears and working together to build something lasting. But for the first time, she felt hope. A chance that love could overcome the challenges. As the sun set once again over the mansion, Layla and Kareem sat together on the terrace, watching the horizon. Both knew the road ahead would be difficult, but they were determined to face it side by side. The atmosphere in the mansion had visibly changed. The initial tension had been replaced with a lighter mood, but the weight of the future still hung over Layla and Kareem. They both knew they were at a crossroads and difficult decisions would need to be made. One morning, Kareem called Layla to his office for a conversation. The room, usually imposing, felt more intimate on that occasion. He gestured for her to sit, and Layla felt a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "I've been thinking a lot about our agreement and everything that's happened since you arrived here," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Layla kept her gaze fixed on him, waiting. "When we made this contract, my focus was on one goal, ensuring an heir for the family. But things have changed," Kareem continued, clasping his hands on the desk. "I can no longer ignore the feelings that have developed between us." Layla's heart raced. This was something she had longed to hear, but she also feared what might come next. "And what does that mean?" she asked softly. "It means I want to find a way to make this work for both of us. I want you to stay, not as part of a contract, but because we choose to be together." Kareem's words felt like a glimmer of hope, but Layla knew it wouldn't be that simple. There were many layers to their situation, and she needed to be sure they were both ready to face the consequences. That afternoon, as she walked through the gardens, Layla reflected on what Kareem had said. As much as she felt strongly for him, the reality remained harsh. Her son, Ayman, was in another city, and the contract stipulated that she would leave after the baby was born. Later, Layla found Amira tending to some plants near the central fountain and decided to open up. "Amira, do you think I can trust Kareem?" Layla asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Amira looked up, surprised by the question, but responded sincerely. "Mr. Kareem is a man of his word. He never makes promises he doesn't intend to keep. But he's also human, Layla. And like you, he's trying to find a balance between what he feels and what he needs to do." Layla absorbed those words, feeling slightly more at ease, though still conflicted. The next day, Karim invited Layla to visit an orphanage he supported, something he had done before, but this time it carried a different significance. Upon their arrival, the children greeted them with laughter and hugs. Layla felt a wave of warmth as she watched Karim interact with them, his usual seriousness giving way to a gentler, more caring side. "You truly care about them," Layla said as they watched the children play. "They remind me that life is about more than responsibilities and business. There's beauty in simplicity," Karim replied, looking at her with intensity. Those words resonated deeply with Layla. For the first time, she felt that Karim was truly ready to change, to relinquish some of the control he valued so much in exchange for something more genuine. Back at the mansion, Karim made the decision to revise the contract. He gathered his lawyers and adjusted several clauses, ensuring that Layla would have more freedom and the right to maintain contact with Ayman after the baby's birth. When he presented the changes to Layla, she was visibly moved. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, holding the contract with trembling hands. "Because I want you to know you're not alone in this. I don't want you to feel trapped. I want you to stay because you trust me, not because you're obligated." Tears streamed down Layla's face, but this time they were tears of relief and gratitude. The days continued to pass, and the bond between Karim and Layla grew stronger. Conversations that were once formal now flowed naturally. They shared stories, dreams, and fears, building a solid foundation for whatever lay ahead. One night, as they sat on the terrace, Karim brought up an idea he had been considering for some time. "Layla, I want to meet Ayman." The suggestion caught Layla off guard. She remained silent for a few moments, processing what he had said. "Are you sure?" she asked hesitantly. "Absolutely. He's part of you, and I want to know every part of your life." Layla felt her heart warm. Karim's willingness to include Ayman in their lives was a clear sign of his commitment to building something real. The trip to visit Ayman was filled with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. Karim appeared calm, but Layla knew he was nervous. When they arrived, Ayman ran into Layla's arms, hugging her tightly. "Mommy," he exclaimed joyfully. Karim watched the scene with a soft smile. When Layla introduced Ayman to him, the boy looked at Karim curiously. "Are you my mom's friend?" Ayman asked innocently. Karim knelt to meet the boy's eye level and replied, "Yes, I am. And I hope we can be friends too." Ayman smiled, and Layla felt a mix of relief and happiness. The interaction between the two was natural, as if Ayman could sense that Karim was a safe presence. Back at the mansion, Layla began to feel that, for the first time, she was truly building something solid. Her relationship with Karim was no longer based solely on the contract, but on trust and genuine feelings. Yet she knew the road ahead would still require courage and patience. One evening, as they gazed at the stars together, Karim held Layla's hand and said, "I know we still have a lot to face, but I want you to know I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this work." Layla felt her heart fill with hope. For the first time, she truly believed that a future together was possible. Life at the Al Fayed mansion was becoming increasingly familiar to Layla, but the bond between her and Karim was still developing. After the visit with Ayman, something shifted. Karim seemed more attentive, more present, as if he was finally beginning to grasp the depth of the life Layla had led before stepping into his world. One morning, as they had coffee on the terrace, Karim made an unexpected suggestion. "I want Ayman to live here," he said, his voice calm yet resolute. Layla's eyes widened in surprise. "Are you serious?" she asked, still processing the idea. "Yes. If we're going to build something together, I want him to be part of it from the beginning." Layla's heart raced. The thought of having her son close was everything she had hoped for, but doubts lingered. "And what about the contract?" she questioned hesitantly. Karim took a deep breath before responding. "The contract doesn't have to be a barrier. We can adjust the terms to ensure Ayman has a place here without compromising anything." Layla remained silent, deeply moved by Karim's willingness to adapt his life for her. It was a gesture that spoke louder than any words could. Preparations for Ayman's arrival began immediately. Karim instructed Amira to prepare a room for him, decorated with elements Layla suggested. She wanted the space to feel warm and familiar, with touches that reminded Ayman of the home where he had grown up. On the day of Ayman's arrival, Layla was anxious. When the mansion doors opened and Eamon ran into her arms, she held him tightly, as if to shield him from everything. "This place is huge, Mom," Eamon exclaimed, his eyes wide with curiosity as he looked around. Kareem, who had been observing from a distance, approached slowly. He knelt to Eamon's level and extended his hand. "Welcome, Eamon. I hope you'll like it here." The boy shook his hand with a shy smile. "Thank you, sir." Karim smiled, and Layla noticed that, even in his seriousness, there was a genuine effort to connect with Eamon. The first few days were a mix of adjustments and discoveries. Eamon quickly adapted to the luxurious environment of the mansion, exploring every corner and asking curious questions about everything. Karim, though reserved, showed patience and interest, answering each of his questions calmly. One night, as Layla tucked Eamon into bed, he asked, "Mom, is Mr. Karim a good man?" Layla was surprised by the question, but answered honestly, "He is. He's learning to be better every day." Eamon smiled, satisfied with the answer, and soon fell asleep. Layla sat by his side, watching his peaceful face. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was on the right path. Over time, Karim and Eamon began to form a bond. They spent afternoons playing chess or walking in the gardens. Karim, who once seemed so distant, revealed a more relaxed and caring side. During one of their walks, Eamon suddenly stopped and looked up at Karim. "Do you like my mom?" he asked with the innocent curiosity of a child. Karim chuckled, surprised by Ayman's frankness. "I do," he replied sincerely. "She's a very special woman." Ayman smiled and continued walking, leaving Karim with a faint smile on his face. That simple yet meaningful exchange was a sign that their bond was growing stronger. One afternoon, Layla found Karim in his office, reviewing documents. She entered slowly, hesitating. "Can I interrupt?" she asked, holding a cup of tea. Karim looked up and smiled. "Always." She sat on the nearby sofa, watching as he returned his attention to the papers. There was something reassuring about seeing him so focused and dedicated. "You're working so hard for us," she said, breaking the silence. Karim set down his pen and looked at her directly. "Because you're worth it." The simplicity of his response made Layla's heart race. She knew that despite all the challenges, she was building something real with him. The months flew by, and the Al Fayed mansion was filled with a different energy. The relationship between Karim and Layla deepened, and Ayman became an essential part of their home. Their bond flourished amidst new experiences, and the anticipation of the baby's arrival brought them even closer. One evening, as Layla rested on the terrace, she felt a slight discomfort in her abdomen. Thinking it was just another pregnancy symptom, she tried to ignore it, but the pain grew more intense. Alarmed, she called for Amira, who immediately rushed to Karim. "Layla is going into labor," Amira announced, her eyes wide with urgency. Karim ran to the bedroom, finding Layla breathless, trying to manage the contractions. "We're going to the hospital now," he said firmly, holding her hand. The drive to the hospital was tense. Karim, usually composed, couldn't hide his worry. He gripped Layla's hand tightly, whispering words of encouragement as he watched her with anxious eyes. "Everything will be fine, Layla. I'm here with you," he repeated reassuringly. Upon their arrival, the medical team took over, but Karim refused to leave Layla's side. He stayed with her throughout the labor, holding her hand and encouraging her every step of the way. Hours later, the sound of a baby's cry filled the room. Karim looked at the tiny boy in his arms, his heart overflowing with emotion. "He's beautiful, Layla. Perfect," he said, tears welling in his eyes. Layla smiled, exhausted but overjoyed. It was a moment that marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. A few days after the birth, Layla was resting in the bedroom with the baby in her arms when Karim entered, holding an envelope. He sat beside her, his expression serious, but his eyes shining with tenderness. "Layla, I want you to know something," Karim began as he opened the envelope. "This contract no longer holds any value." Before her surprised eyes, Karim tore the document into small pieces, letting them fall to the floor. "Everything I've done so far has been for you and for our family. I don't want anything, not even a contract, to define our future." Karim took Layla's hands, and with a gaze full of love, knelt before her. "Layla, you've brought light into my life. You've taught me what true love is and what it means to have a family. I want to spend the rest of my life by your side, raising our children and facing whatever comes together." He opened a small velvet box, revealing a delicate ring with a diamond that softly reflected the light. "Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Layla's face. Her heart raced with joy and she could barely speak. "Yes, Karim, I will." Ayman, who had been peeking through the door, ran toward them and hugged them tightly. "We're going to be a real family," he exclaimed, beaming. Karim lifted the boy into his arms, and together they celebrated the moment that marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. The months leading up to the wedding were filled with joy and preparations. Layla wanted a ceremony that reflected her roots and the love they had built, and Karim made sure to fulfill her every wish. The mansion transformed into a fairy tale setting, adorned with exotic flowers, delicate lights, and details blending both Arabic and Western traditions. Finally, the big day arrived. The sun shone brightly, illuminating the garden where the ceremony would take place. Layla looked stunning in a white dress with golden accents, while Ayman, dressed in a small formal suit, proudly carried the rings. As Layla walked down the aisle, Karim's eyes filled with emotion. He watched her with admiration, as if seeing her for the first time. "You look breathtaking," he whispered, taking her hands. The vows were simple, yet deeply meaningful. They promised love, respect, and partnership, sealing their commitment with a kiss that drew heartfelt applause from the guests. The reception was a celebration of cultures and love. Traditional Arabic music blended with melodies from Layla's homeland, creating a festive and warm atmosphere. Ayman ran around the hall, thrilled with his new baby brother and the new life they were building. "This is the start of everything I've ever dreamed of," Layla said as she watched the scene beside Karim. "And it's only the beginning," he replied, holding her hand. By the end of the night, under a starry sky, Karim and Layla danced together, surrounded by family and friends, celebrating a love that had overcome every barrier. It was the perfect ending to a journey that began unexpectedly, but blossomed into a story of true love. While Ayman played with the baby, Karim and Layla exchanged glances that promised to face the future together, no matter the challenges. They knew they had everything they needed: love, unity, and a family that would continue to grow. And so, under the shining desert stars, their story reached its perfect conclusion. A new beginning filled with hope, love, and happiness. What do you think? Did Layla make the right decision by forgiving and marrying Karim? Share your thoughts in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with all our stories. And make sure to check out more heartwarming stories by clicking here on the end screen.